Hello, today we're going to investigate how to construct a box and whisker plot. The other day we introduced it and talked about how to read or interpret it, and today we're going to construct it. So our vocabulary involves the important points that we need to find when making this plot based on our data. So let's look at the first one. It mentions the lower extreme and the upper extreme. So we're going to put a point here, and this is the lower extreme, and this is the upper extreme. So those are the first 2 points that we're going to look for after we put the data in order. Next, we're looking at the median, and this is the median of all of the data. So we're going to find the true median. It's also known as the second quartile. And there's a point right here. So right there on that line, that is where the true median of all the data is. And we also refer to it as the second quartile, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Our next vocabulary words are first quartile and third quartile. Those also involve the box, and it's the end point where the whisker is. So right here is a point, and at the other end of the box right here is a point. And so this is our first quartile, this is our third quartile, and this one is our second quartile. And if you look at them, this involves the end of our first quarter of data, this involves the end of our second quarter of data, this is the end point of our third quarter of data, and so we could call this our fourth quartile point, but we prefer to call it upper extreme. So our last vocabulary term is called the interquartile range. And the range of all of the data would be the upper extreme minus the lower extreme, for whatever this point is on the number line minus whatever this point is on the number line. That would be the range. However, if we're asked for the interquartile range, they're referring to the points that are involved in the box. So in other words, we're going to take the third quartile point and the first minus the first quartile point. So this is the interquartile range. And that's important because that's 50% of our data. So now let's move on. We're going to find these 5 major points, and we're going to construct a box and whisker plot. So please turn to the third page. We're looking at not the second page, but the third page. The directions say find the 5 key points that are needed to create a box and whisker plot from this set of data. Put the data in order first. So I'm going to start with the lowest data number, which is 2. And then I'm going to ask you to pause the video and start working on this. By the way, there are 18 numbers, so when you're done, go ahead and check and see if we have the same list of data. Okay, please check to make sure you have the same data and in the same order. So we have to put the data in order. I prefer to circle it rather than cross it off. That way I can still see the numbers. So there were always check, by the way, the original data had 18 numbers, and you should have 18 numbers listed. So now we're going to start. We're going to look for the lower extreme and the upper extreme. The lower extreme is the lowest number, so the lowest number is 2. The upper extreme is the highest number, so the highest number is 14. The second quartile is the true median and the median of all the data. So I'm going to start by crossing off 1 from the front, 1 from the back, 2 front, 2 back, etc. So we're going to continue to do this. So I now have 4 crossed off on either side. So if I check, I have 8 crossed off on this side and 8 crossed off on this side, and unfortunately, I have 2 numbers in the middle. So let's think about this. If I have 7 and another 7, they're both middle numbers, is there a number in between them? Halfway in between them? Well, no. 7, there's nothing in between 7 and 7. In fact, this would be a case that I want to prove this by adding the 7 and 7. If it was 7 and 9, I'd add those together. That's going to give me 14. And I'm going to take that number and divide it by 2. And it's going to give me back 7. So the middle number, the median, is 7. But what's important for you to know is this 7, I've circled the median, is in between these two numbers because that's important to know that I've separated now this into the lower half of data. This is the upper half of data. Because now we're going to be asked to find the first quartile, which is the median of the first half. So let's count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because this 7 is part of the lower data. So I have 9 numbers. This time, we're going to cross off a number from the front, a number from the back, but we're working with the lower half of the data. Front and back, front and back, front and back. And guess what? We have a middle number that's just a single number. So the first quartile, the median of the first half, is 4. Now we're going to do that with the second half of the data, this side of the data. And there should be 9 numbers. Let's double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are. So the data has indeed been split in half. So now we're going to cross off 1 from the front, 1 from the back, second one, third one, fourth one, and we again have a middle number, one single number in the middle of the second half. So we now have the 5 key points in order to build this line. Before we build the line, though, let's look at what our numbers, the range is. It goes from 2 up to 14. So when we look at our number line that we're going to try to build, we're going to base it on the actual numbers. And I see from 2 to 14. So we would be able to use either a scale of 1, which would be best, because that's the most accurate, or we could build a scale of 2, like 2, 4, 6, 8, or we could build a scale of 5. With this data, 2 to 14 is not that much of a range. So we usually like to use a number before the data begins and a number after. So that means that we're going to try to build 14, or 15 rather, lines here. So we could go with a scale of 1, but we could also go with a scale of 2. And that's going to cut down the number of lines we need to make. So I'm going to go ahead, since the data begins with 2, I'm going to actually build a scale of 2 so you can see what I'm talking about. But I'm going to start with 0. I'm only starting with 0 because our lowest number is 2, and I'm going to go up by 2's. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. And I'm trying to make my lines as even as possible, the sections rather, about the same space between. We have 10, 12, 14, and 16. So we could have gone up by a scale of 1, meaning 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this helps us kind of build a simpler number line. However, our data, we're going to have in between the numbers, and it might not be as accurate to read the graph. We're going to start with the first, the lowest number, which is 2. And when we build this, we go a little bit above the number line, right above 2. Our upper extreme is 14. Well, this is helpful because those are even numbers, so they're right above our number line. Those are the extremes, lower and upper. Now we're going to do the quartile, the second quartile, the true medium, 7. So this is where I have to look, and I need to be in between 6 and 7, so halfway in between. And unfortunately, I didn't mention this before, but I'm trying to keep all of these points horizontally aligned, so they're kind of in a row. So we're going to talk about 7 would be approximately here, trying to keep all those points in line. Now I need my first quartile, which is above 4, and I need my and this should say the second. This should actually be the third quartile. I just caught that typo. Third quartile, and that's 10. And now we're ready to create our box and whisker plot. So the second and the third quartile form the box. The second quartile's in the middle, and I'm going to attach my lower extreme to my first quartile point and my third quartile point to my upper extreme, and we've now created a box and whisker plot. So I'd like you to try page 2 and build one on your own. Thanks for listening.